here. I know most of us don't really think about infertility or pregnancy or any of that thing until all of a sudden the time comes and things don't happen the way we think we're going to. It can be really daunting and really overwhelming, and so this session is really focused on how to adapt to that and how to adapt to those new ways of trying to create your family when things don't happen as easily as we expected them to. To do that, we have this great panelist here, these great panelists here. First, we have Moskin, who is a psychotherapist and blogger with Don't Count Your Eggs. Nicole, Lawson, who is the co-founder of the Baby Quest Foundation and the co-founder as well of Abundant Beginnings Surrogacy. And finally, we have Allgood, who is the co-founder of Abundant Beginnings Surrogacy, along with Nicole. My name is Holly. I am also a blogger with Ready to Be Mom. And my personal story is that I was diagnosed very young with infertility in my 20s, which you really don't expect to have happen. So that was definitely a blow. And I think the hardest part outside of the money that is involved and the time and all of those things that everyone talks about when it comes to infertility was really that loss of innocence that comes with venturing on this journey and realizing, having a baby isn't going to be as easy as a bottle of wine and, all of these things that you're told your whole life. And so that's definitely something that's been important for me in my journey. That's why I started blogging, and that's why I'm really excited to hear from our panelists today. So I'll let you start, Maya, with telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. How did I get here? My husband and I have been trying to make a family for 4 years now. And we've definitely had to adjust to our current situation and just sort of readjust the concept of how we're going to build a family and how, where babies come from, essentially. So my history is I was diagnosed with diminished ovarian reserve at 30 or 31, so in my early 30s. And that's something that you just really don't think about, that you'll be 30 and starting to try your family and you don't have the eggs to do so. So we moved to IVF, and I actually also had some issues with my tubes that was later, it was misdiagnosed early on. But anyway, we moved quickly to IVF because of some tube factor issues as well. And we retrieved 3 eggs, and all 3 fertilized, and then they all fell apart in the dish. And so I had nothing to transfer. And so that was, as we're talking about adapting to these different situations, that was shocking. How could that be? How do you go through all of this and spend the money and take the time and do everything and then have nothing to put back in, essentially? So after that, we did a couple inseminations because it turned out that my tubes were actually open. So, through all the procedures, you're also going through, minor surgeries or x-rays or, different processes. Anyway, so we did some inseminations, and when that didn't work out, we decided to move to donor eggs. And my younger sister generously donated her eggs to us over the summer, and we were a Baby Quest recipient, so we were able to get some financial assistance from Baby Quest, which is an amazing nonprofit that helps people like us. So we moved to do that, and that was how we spent last summer. And unfortunately, that wasn't successful either. And so when you just want a family, you keep doing one thing after the other to try to kind of figure it out, I think it just becomes, it really is a journey, I would say. And I don't know if, not a lot of people, have this kind of extensive journey to build a family. But anyway, so we tried donor eggs, and when that didn't work, we've had to you have to recollect for a second. My husband's big on taking a step back. I'm always big on taking 10 steps forward because we're just trying to get through here. But we took a step back, and you have to really look at what you have left, physically, emotionally, financially, relationally, so you have to kind of take stock and then figure out what makes the most sense to move on. And so for us, that's going to be an embryo adoption, which I didn't even know existed until sort of recently. So that's what we've decided is going to be the best chance for us. So that's what we're heading towards. And in terms of, I know we were talking a little bit about how, I relate to this topic. I think, when you are diagnosed sort of on the younger side of things and you have to just figure out what's important to you, Is it, caring? Is it your genetics? Kind of having to reframe the ideas of, how to get, and reframe the goal. Is the goal to carry a baby, the goal to have a baby, the goal to be a parent, what's kind of there. So I think there's just a lot of discussions that happen around creating a family that, you only have if you've gone through a process like this. So that's a little bit about my story.
Thank you. Nicole, can you tell us a little bit about your connection to this topic? And
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here today. It's interesting. Everybody, I can sit here today and share my story probably a little bit easier than Maya. I was fortunate to, I struggled for a little over 4 years to have a child, and eventually had 2 children born via surrogates. And the road, it's sort of funny because you think about what you went through, and obviously back then it was awful and it sucked, and just everything was, and we were talking about this earlier, everything when you're going through it just revolves around infertility. That's all you think about, that's all you talk about, that's all you hear, and all of a sudden all of your girlfriends are pregnant, which you want to be happy for them, but you're not, because you want to be in their position, and every time it's, when is it my turn, when is it my turn? For me, I feel very blessed that I did have my turn, and it's fantastic, but I still, you see so many people going through it, so it's very hard. And I still even, remember to this day where I was when I heard that I couldn't carry a child. And I was sitting on Santa Monica Boulevard. I think it was after work, and the doctor calls, and she's like, I just want to let you know we got these results. Again, this is after 4 years, and you're not going to be able to carry a baby. And I was kind of like, and I don't think I cried. It was just one of those moments where I was like, oh shit, like what is she saying? And I called my mom, I think before I even called my husband, because at this point, having a baby was a whole family affair, not just with my husband. So I called my mom, and I was just like, I need a surrogate, whatever that is. And for me, I was very lucky because I had family support. Nobody cared. They wanted me to have a baby, which was fantastic. And I was blessed also because with family, I had the financial support. And that was one of the reasons why Baby Quest was started, because if it wasn't for my family, we had no money. We had spent most of our money the 4 years of just trying, and now here we were at this point of needing, $80,000, $90,000 to have a surrogate. So if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have our children. So that's why Baby Quest was formed, to help others who financially can't afford it. And then for me, adapting, it's so, you sort of have to look at it, and some people really focus on, okay, I want to be pregnant, but is it about the pregnancy or about just having a child? So for me, I just really had to focus on, I want a baby. Would it have been cool to feel my baby kick and not read it via text from my surrogate? Yeah, of course it would have been. But at the same time, I had to really focus on just what it was that I was doing, and it was having a baby, however that came about. So again, I think when people are going through this, and now co-owning a surrogacy agency, it's really a blessing to be able to sit with these clients and hear their stories and their struggles and try to express to them it's just about having a baby, however it comes into this world, whether it's embryo adoption or an egg donor, sperm donor, whatever it is, it's about holding that baby. That's the most important thing. And it's, when you're going through this, it's really hard to focus on that. But that's what I did, and that's what got me through it with family and friends. So.
Thank you. And then you're also the co-owner with Nicole. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement? And
Sure. Oh, that was really loud. So, I so appreciate hearing both of your stories and the details of it. And, I know that there was a lot of pain involved, that you've already worked through a lot of that to help you get to the place that you are today. I grew up in a large family in the Midwest, and that was, having a family was just the expectation. That was what was going to happen. That was when you became an adult, was when you got married and you grew up and you had your children. So I didn't even, I guess it never crossed my mind that that wouldn't happen and wouldn't happen easily. So my professional life, I've done a lot of different things, ranging from teaching to creating videos for children, families, to studying psychology. And really my whole background is really all about having a family and helping create families. And I feel really good about that, and really starting Abundant Beginnings has just been an incredible journey. Having Nicole as a partner who's been through it personally has been, we just bring a different depth to what we can offer our clients. So as you can imagine, people come to us from all different walks of life. We get young, like both of these women who found out in their 30s. We get people who are in their 40s who married late. We have gay couples. We have people who've been through cancer. All kinds of stories and experiences. People who come from other countries where surrogacy is not even legal, and they have to pretend like they're pregnant, and that they came to California for fertility treatments, and then they go home with their baby and have gone through that sort of myth with their. One woman didn't tell her mother the truth. So that's how desperate people are when they come to us. I once heard one of the IVF doctors that we worked with was talking about, he was prizing his staff for how the kindness that they show on a regular basis to people who go through these infertility issues. And he explained infertility this way, and it really made a lot of sense to me, that people come to him feeling that they've been let down, that it's their God-given right to have a child, and they aren't able to have one. And so that, as many of you probably know, that creates a lot of upset, and some of those reactions then get taken out on the doctor, the staff, whoever is in the way, whoever happens to be there. So we, as owners of a surrogacy agency, often receive some of that as well. But we understand where it's coming from, and it's really important to release those feelings. I had a young woman early on who had an autoimmune disorder, and she couldn't stay off of the steroids for 9 months to carry a pregnancy, so she was looking to use a surrogate. And professional woman who would call me up to talk about something the surrogate had done or something that had happened, and in a rage, and I could feel that the water, like she was boiling and boiling and boiling, and then all of a sudden she would just burst into tears, and then she would apologize for the tears, which I told her never to do. It's really important for us to cry. It's important for us to handle and release those emotions however they come up. So this topic of the panel, adapting to your journey to parenthood, I don't know of any of you who are in the room if surrogacy is an option or something that you've considered. We certainly are willing to answer any questions that you have about any of the things that we talked about today. I have some information, if you're interested, that talks about the pricing. It's an estimate of the total costs of surrogacy, if that's something that you're interested in learning about. And I also found, I was doing a little research for the panel today, and on the ASRM, which is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, on their website, they have a whole patient resource section. And that, with all kinds of topics, the latest research, so I encourage you to really get in there and look around and see, look at that information. It also lists doctors, reputable doctors in your area who have that reproductive endocrinology fellowship that they've done. So I think that's pretty much it. I would love to hear from you and what questions you might have and how we can support you today.
All three of us, you guys all mentioned something very interesting that I think most of us can relate to, and it's kind of the theme of infertility as a journey. And the fact that it's a journey that is not a straight line. It doesn't go from point A to point B. It doesn't go from, hey, you were going to have a hard time having a baby, to here's the baby. We have starts and stops, and you said you've got the 2 steps forward, and your husband wants to take the step back. So how do you know, for you personally or professionally, when is the right time to move to a new procedure, to go from, I think we all start out, I know I did, with the at-home system of an OPK, ovulation predictor kit, and timed intercourse.
So
And then you
long
moved
ago.
so long ago.
Seems like a distant memory.
So young and naive then. But yeah, how do you know when it's right for you to go from that stage to seeking out a specialist, to go from the specialist who misdiagnosed you to reaching out to a new one, to give up the this method for the next method? When is it time to go from IUI to IVF, from IVF to surrogacy? Can you tell us a little bit about those processes for you?
I can. I do. How do you know when it's time to move on? Well, I mean, I think it's a really individual, within, just a very personal decision. For some people who can afford it, they can just say, I'm going to do IVF until I get a baby. And I know people who've done that and have spent $250,000 and have babies. That's given that the medical piece actually works for them. And I know other people who it's the medical piece that gives them no choice, and that essentially then gives you, and that's kind of, it sounds like what happened with you, that the doctor told you you're not going to be able to carry, so you kind of knew maybe what you had to do. For people who have unexplained infertility or the problems with their eggs, I think it really becomes like you have a handful of options, none of which are terrific, and you kind of have to just decide what's going to be the best choice out of what you've got. And you just have to also figure out like what you can handle and what your body can handle. And for my husband and I, we made like a little diagram. We made like a tree. So we did like, okay, first we're going to do IVF, and if that doesn't work, we're going to do this. And then we were surprised when my tubes were actually open. Then we could go the IUI route. Which was less expensive,
Like an offshoot.
Yeah, we were like, oh, this other like road opened up. So so we went down that road, and then we were actually going to do one more. And after doing 2, my body was just done. I just felt like, it's enough. Like I can't. So I think also you have to take that into consideration. Like we have our plan. We have plan A, B, C, D. I think we're like at plan F minus or something, But, and also the timing of when my sister could donate became an issue. So she only had like this time, so we had to kind of figure that out. So there's so many things to factor in, but I think for us also, and if you can look back and go, oh, I wish I didn't do that, or I could have done this instead, or I wish I didn't spend the money, but I think in order to have no regrets, you just have to do what you feel like you need to do in order to then move on. So I did IVF once, which is not a lot, but I felt like that was enough for me to know, okay, I tried this, I'm going to put it to rest. And then you have to, for me it became letting go of my own genetics. And, how do you do that? How do you go, I'm going to make a baby that's my baby, but it's not related to me? Like, how does that work? So I think it's just really sitting with it, and you go through the stages of grief about there's so many different losses that people experience with infertility, whether it's miscarriage or losing, being able to carry a child, or your genetic link to that child, and yeah.
It's so, and just as far as like giving up, I don't think, like for me, what was funny is like I accepted having a surrogate the first time around, and then a few years later, I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready for my second kid. And I looked at my husband, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to the doctor and see if I can carry. He looked at me like, honey, we've been through this like 4 years ago.
We've already played this.
Yeah. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to go. So I go to them, join us. I go to the appointment. I'm like, so I really want another kid, and I think I want to try on myself. And she goes, Nicole, and I think I told, my biggest thing was I didn't want to ask my parents once again for money to have a surrogate. So it was like, I'm just going to just go, and if I have to suffer a miscarriage again, whatever, I'll do it. And she looks at me, and the doctor's like, Nicole, you can't, no, I'm not going to do it. No, just, you got to get a surrogate again. So I don't, like, no matter when you tell yourself, okay, you're done, you've tried everything, you still like, no, I can try it one more time. Like
Yeah.
it's really hard.
I think, I
to
think
give
you're right. I
up.
think mentally it's that loss of innocence that comes from the second you find out that infertility is your reality. I've had my tubes removed. My chance of getting pregnant naturally is non-existent. And I still had a moment earlier this year where I thought, oh, I'm late. What if? No, get that out of my head.
Yes.
It just, you can't, you can't untrain your brain from thinking. It's a natural instinct, I think, inside of
Right.
all of us to think that, you're just going to come into this time in your life where you're going to be ready to be a parent, and that's going to just come to you. And when it doesn't, it's really hard to adjust.
Yeah. And I think it's also hard when you're sort of, you have to be able to hold on to the hope for some. I mean, if you don't have tubes, that's one thing. Or if there's really, but with a lot, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, who knows what might. But if you it's like people always say, right, the one good egg. You
Right.
kind of want to punch people in the face when they say it. But it does happen, and we've all heard these stories of people who you keep trying, and eventually something works. So it's like you have to kind of be hopeful and optimistic and be open and willing to, have a miracle happen in essence, but also planning your life. And there's a certain point where this becomes such a big part of your life, it's a quality of life issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I gotta get out of this. What's the fastest route?
Your life is revolving around.
Yeah, and I think that, that it's unfortunate, but I think that helps you prioritize too. I just want to be a parent at this point. Mm-hmm. So my genes, I mean, look, my kid will end up dodging some genetic bullets, right? So it's like, but you kind of think that way. You kind of go like, I just want to have a family, and all those things that mattered so much in the beginning. And it's unfortunate. My husband, his sperm is fine, so an egg donor would actually make more sense for us, but we just can't afford it.
Right.
So when it comes to the financial piece, it sucks, and he had to sort of sit with it. And we said we could take out loan. There's stuff that we could do. And at the end of the day, he said, I just want to be a dad, and so that's what our goal has become, but plan F.
You actually hit on something interesting in that, talking about when people make that comment about one good egg, and how frustrating. Yes, like, oh, you don't. So how do you cope with those kinds of things? And then I'm sure as you go through each process, as you move on to surrogacy, as you move on to donor eggs, you definitely, the comments ramp up. I'm sure everyone in this room has heard "just relax" at some
Just
point.
adopt.
Just adopt.
As if there's a baby store somewhere that you can just go.
Right.
And
The word "just" gets thrown out a lot, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Like just,
just
it's
relax,
so easy.
just adopt.
Or those anecdotes. Oh, my friend's sister's cousin's brother spent $100,000 and now they got pregnant accidentally, and it's a miracle.
Right.
So how do you cope with that? How do you cope with those aspects of this process and moving through the process and addressing those people, addressing your own emotional responses of wanting to punch people in the face, but knowing that that's not really the best response sometimes?
I think
Do you have a good
always in
example?
my situation, my husband would just take the brunt of most of it, where he would just, I would just say it. And it's hard. Like in the beginning, I was definitely more sensitive to it. I think after like my second miscarriage, I remember I was sitting at something, and it was like a family member, or somebody was like, well, you could just adopt. And I'm like, and I wasn't even at the place of surrogate yet. And when somebody said just adopt, I'm like, what? Like, and it was so true. And I think I was more sensitive to it in the beginning. And after a while, I don't know if you just sort of desensitize yourself, or you just have to, you got to move beyond it.
Yeah.
Because people say some crazy things.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they're coming from a place of love, and they just don't know what else to say. It's like when somebody has a miscarriage, I'm so sorry, but it's going to happen again, or it'll be your turn soon. And I think I say it to people now, and I'm like, shit, did I just say that? Like, that's so, because I hated when people said that
Yeah.
to me. I'm just like, no, it's not going to happen. I want it now,
Right.
But, and it's coming from a place of love. It's not coming from.
Right, no malicious
No,
intent.
they
is
just don't know
involved.
what to say. It's
And-
like,
Right.
it's just, yeah. It's
Yeah, and I think it's reminding yourself that people have good intentions, but I think that's why things like this are so important to sort of talk about, because I think a big problem is that people don't talk about that, or there's shame associated with
Right.
this process, and I'm not embarrassed about anything.
No.
It's like this is an unfortunate thing that happens to a lot of people. I mean, there are millions of people who go through this, and there's, some support, but a lot of people that I talk to, they haven't told their parents,
Right.
or they're embarrassed about it, or, so I think the more we can have a dialogue about, what is surrogacy and make it make sense so people don't, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about like what is a surrogate and why do people get a surrogate, or about adoption and open adoption,
Right.
and what is that process like and what does that mean, and so there are all these different options, and I'm really grateful to have the option of adopting an embryo. It's like sounds kind of, it's a really different thing, but it's not legal in a lot of places, and same thing with surrogacy, so I think we have to remember that we are lucky that we live in a place that we have these choices, and that we, for a lot of us, can actually have the means to do some of these things. But that keeping kind of an open dialogue about it, I think, helps to educate people, because I think that's lacking, and that's why you get just relax.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we hear a lot is once the baby comes, however, whether it's adoption or surrogacy, is that nobody cares anymore.
Right.
Nobody asks questions. You don't care anymore. It's just part of the story,
Right.
and it's an important part of the story, but it's not. Now you're
There's not a
focused
stigma
on
attached to
Right.
it. Right.
right.
Yeah, I think you're right too. With the conversation, for me personally, that's been my biggest coping mechanism, is coming away from the place of being quiet, being to myself, not telling friends, not telling family, to here I am sitting on a stage talking about my infertility and my lack of tubes to strangers, because that's how I cope now, is to just be open and be forthcoming, and have these conversations. We also just now, I think you hit a little bit on your husband being the one to deal with a lot of that and take the brunt of that. Do you feel that his adaptation, or men in general, they adapt differently to this process? And what's that kind of process look like in your experience?
I think for husbands, where they're coming from such a completely different place, obviously with all of this, they don't have to do anything. They're just dealing with you and your emotional, hormonal self. Train wreck self, totally. And, my husband, if he were here, he would say, I just didn't want to see her suffer anymore. And I'm sure it's the same thing for your husband. They don't want to see a person have to go through so much to want something so badly. So for them, they will take the route that is the quickest to get a baby. Or but yeah, from a man's perspective, it's so different, and it's hard for them to understand so much.
Julie, maybe you can answer this part of the, on the same note, and from the aspect of for men, when there's a sperm donor involved, when they're the ones that are letting go of the biology. Do you see a different process there for that adaptation for men to kind of process those emotions, or?
I think in that aspect, it's really the same. It's the same for men as it is for women. They get to the place where they want a child. They've wanted to be a dad. Just like we wanted to be moms when we were growing up, they wanted to be dads too. I have a 15-year-old son who said something the other day about when he has kids.
Right.
So he's already thinking about that. So I'm not sure it's that different.
No.
What I have noticed, in the surrogacy process, that sometimes we have the fathers, if it's a heterosexual couple, the fathers who are doing everything, because the wife, the mom, the intended mother is too emotional and she can't deal with the surrogate. It's too hard for her. And so the intended father really is the one who takes over and is really the one who's interacting. So of course I've seen it the other way as well, but it's an interesting process to watch, kind of like what Nicole said, is they're tired of watching their partner, suffer in this way, and here is something he can do.
Yeah, it's a way to be active.
Yeah.
And I think that helplessness, I think there are two things. When it is maybe a sperm issue, the different men that I have talked to just about this, it gets kind of tied up with male virility, and rather than a medical issue, which is kind of unfortunate. So I think there's probably even it might be harder for men
Yeah,
in
there might
some
be even
ways.
more shame.
Yeah, and I
locked
think
into that.
women talk about it more and maybe have more support, and maybe men not as much. I don't know, I'm not a man, but that's just kind of what I've noticed. But I think that helplessness and, once the surrogacy process maybe happens, that the husband can kind of step in and take over, versus standing on the sidelines, which is what, I mean, our husbands maybe had to do in a lot of ways, like, okay, I'll hold your hand and, whatever else. But I think it is a very helpless feeling that I know my husband has had, because he just wants to make this better and he wants to help us move on. But
We've talked a little bit about surrogacy throughout the entire panel today, but I'd really like to hear a little bit more about that process. If someone here is considering surrogacy or has any interest in learning more, what can we expect from that process? Like what's involved? What's it going to cost? How do we address those fears about surrogacy?
They won't take your baby.
You don't want your baby. Yeah, that's really the first question everyone
That's always
asks.
the first question.
How do I know they won't take my baby? How do I know they won't want my baby? And really, I think I would probably start by talking about the women who come to us who want to be surrogates. And there's I think also a misconception that people are doing it for the money. And while I know the money helps, and the money is a big part of why a lot of times women want to be surrogates, you can't really pay someone enough to carry a child for you. They have to want to be of service. They have to want to do this to change their lives to help benefit someone else's life. And so women come to us from all different parts of the country as well, different backgrounds. Some of them had children very young. Pregnancy is easy for them. They knew of an aunt, a cousin, someone, and who wasn't able to have children, and they thought, well, I'm going to be able to do that someday. I'm going to be able to do that. We've had women who've thought about it for 10 years, starting when they were in high school.
Wow.
And they come to us, okay, I've had my children, now I'm ready to be a surrogate. So I think I would really kind of start, with that. I think a lot of it is a financial consideration, of course, and like I said, I have some, budgets here if anybody wants one. You can go to our website, which is abcsurrogacy.com, and we have a breakdown of all the costs. Again, it's an amazing journey, and we started an agency so that we could help people step by step go through the process, hold their hands, really help them through the emotional part of it, what to expect with each step. And there's building a relationship with someone who's carrying your child. That kind of trust, to put that kind of trust in someone is really, it's a big deal. It's especially when you've been through so much yourself.
Right.
So, maybe Nicole can address that, trust a little bit, being an intended mother herself.
It's always scary. You've been, as a woman, you've been through so much to get to a point where, okay, surrogate, what is that? Who's going to help me find a person who's going to carry my baby, who I don't know? So it's really, but these women, like I was definitely very nervous and anxious the first time. I did go through an agency. They send me profiles, and it's similar to how we do it. You get 5 profiles of these surrogates. Okay, who do I want to carry my baby? And we're not talking genetics here, so you just want somebody who's healthy, who's had healthy pregnancies, and who has a very stable home life. So that's sort of the thing that you're looking at. And for me, my first surrogate, it's really interesting, and we tell our clients this too. When you meet the surrogate for the first time, things just sort of click, and wow, this person's going to do this amazing thing for me. And this isn't really me personally, but when we meet with these intended moms who don't speak any English, and then they're meeting the surrogate, you're talking about 2 really extremes here of how these people, their home life. But the common thing is, like, these people are helping each other. And I still remember this one meeting where at the end, this mom, she didn't, she only spoke Chinese, she didn't speak any English, but she looks at the surrogate. She just stands up and starts crying, just gives her the biggest hug, and you're just like, oh, sorry. You're just like, and I think I started crying because I'm like, oh my gosh, I love my job. And for me, it was sort of the same thing. You just instantly bond with this person. And the whole process is scary, but at the same time, the surrogates sort of, they take you under their wing, and they are so excited. Every process of the pregnancy, they'll send a picture, like, my belly's growing, he or she kicked for the first time. And for some, I'm sure that's hard. For me, it was slightly hard, but at the same time, I wanted to see her get fat and get big, and that was, really the best part. I know, I think I digress, but anyways, it's really, it's a beautiful relationship that happens sort of immediately, and although it's scary, it was, again, it's not a path that I chose, but at the same time, if you just go into it and just sort of embrace it for what it is, it was beautiful. I mean, it really was. So.
Yeah. Now that you're talking about the relationship with your children's surrogate, and now that you are a parent through surrogacy, do you feel like that relationship has changed you as a parent in a way that it might not have had you not gone that route?
I think yes. I mean, as far as, when you go through surrogacy or you go through egg donor, embryo adoption, whatever it is, you really want that baby. So I might have complained a little bit, but as when the baby was coming, like, I try not to complain so much about being tired, or you really appreciate so much that baby. And even to this day, I still look at them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel very, very blessed. So yeah, I think it changes you.
So when most parents are up in the middle of the night complaining, you're like,
I'm sure I complained, but
it shouldn't rob you of the right to complain. I think every parent has that right.
But yeah, no, I think you really, and as infertility, I'm sure people know this here, like, it's definitely a strain on your relationship. It puts a lot, it really tests the limits of what you can handle. And when that baby came, though, I mean, it's pretty, it really, it makes you appreciate everything that you have. Yeah. So.
How would you guys, as a panel, recommend anyone that is looking into any means of family building? What would you recommend people do in order to choose a reproductive endocrinologist, a surrogacy center, an agency? What's maybe the first step that someone needs to take when they're transitioning into those next steps?
Well, one of the things that I mentioned before was to go onto the ASRM website. That lists a lot of agencies, a lot of doctors. My personal favorite, though, really is referrals. It's to start asking around, start asking your friends, your neighbors. People start to come forward when you start to share your story and bring it out of the, the dark, so to speak, and into the light. That people will start telling you their stories, and I just think that's really the best way to go. Interviewing agencies, interviewing doctors. Who's going to take the time to listen to you? What are you looking for? Are you looking for success rates? ASRM on their website has, different success rates of doctors. Really, and also what can you afford? Who's willing to work with you? So those are some of the ways. We love referrals just because you get a personal sense from someone else who's been through the process, and how were they with you? How did they support you? That type of thing.
And I think you also just need to know what you want. And I think that's hard. I think there's so many different options, and doctors tell you different things, and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's getting to a place where you're open with your journey, with your okay, this is not gonna take a glass of wine and one night in bed. Like, this is gonna be a process. So we've got to then be open and sort of remembering that if you want to be a parent, you will be a parent, and babies exist, and I tell myself this all the time, babies exist and I can get one. And it's just I don't know how, and just yet. But it's sort of going through this, and what are we open to? And, and being open to the different changes and different things, and finding a doctor who will kind of be open with you, and who will be upfront. And for us, I think, I want to know the success rates and all that, but I also want to know what we're going to do, like what's the plan, And I think what I appreciated about the doctor I had is he told me off the bat, the eggs are an issue. The best success you'll have is an egg donor. I wasn't ready to hear it when he told it to me, but I appreciated that he didn't just say, well, let's just do this 5 times, because, he said to us, if you won the lottery, I would say do this again. But the amount of money and emotional toll this is going to take, I'll tell you that the smartest thing to do is egg donation. And now a lot of people get really upset about hearing something like that. So I think, again, that comes back to being open and being able to hear what people say, and I don't know.
Well, it is good to know what it is that you want.
Yeah.
There's one of the fertility clinics that we work with a lot. There are 2 doctors with very different personalities. One is just no nonsense, no mess around. He's just going to tell you like it is. And the other one is just softer and gentler, just really laid back, And people come to us using both of those doctors, and you can see the different, personality choices.
You have to find a match.
Yeah. I think it's really just, if you don't know, setting up appointment, setting up, even if you're not local, setting up a Skype call, talking to them, seeing who you feel most comfortable with, and then just going for it.
Right, kind of going from there. We talked just now about, going through that process and meeting with doctors, and I know that one of the hardships that people face is that consultations aren't always free.
Yeah.
You want to go and interview everybody you can, but if everyone's charging you $300 a pop, you have to whittle your list down, and then that's like the cheapest thing going is the consultation. So how do you cope with that side? You haven't won the lottery. How do you cope with those daunting?
Not yet.
Not yet, right? It can still happen. How do you cope with those daunting financial aspects of this process and this journey? I mean, adoptions, embryo donation, egg donation, surrogacy, none of it comes with insurance. And, what are some ways that we can cope with that side of things?
Well, you really need to budget.
I was going to say, I haven't had a haircut since like 2011.
Is this a long-term goal or a short-term goal? Not everybody has the money to do it. We've had many clients who came to us and said, the money that we were going to use for a mortgage, no more. Yeah. We're just going to rent.
College fund is.
Yep, we're just renting apartments. That's it. This is where our money is going.
It's a huge reality for people.
It is. Mm-hmm.
It's there. I think you feel really fortunate when you do have some means, to do things. There are some places like Baby Quest Foundation that you can apply to try to get a grant, and they can. But it's a lot. You sort of prioritize. And you feel really angry that, how you're going to make your baby sometimes is dictated by what you can afford. And it feels really unfair for a lot of people. And I think then you just have to make decisions with that as a reality. So it's like I said, we're not going to do egg donation, because we can't afford it. And we're totally okay with that now, But I think you have to get to a place of being okay with that, because there is an unfairness to it for a while that just kind of sits with you, and you're like, this doesn't feel good at all. But yeah, I think budgeting and haircuts, manicures are like way out the window. Anything that's, you're fighting for your family, and you'll do whatever it takes, and it becomes kind of a test of just determination. It's like you want this, you want that, but then it gets to a point where it's like you're determined to do this, and you'll find a way, but it is a lot.
And we actually have Pamela Hirsch, who is the founder of Baby Quest. She's here with us in the audience. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about your organization and the ways that you can help us financially with these concerns.
If any of you have any questions, Baby Quest is my attempt to make something good out of a situation that started out very badly. I'm Nicole's mother, and we were very, very fortunate to be able to help them with the 2 surrogacies. If not, I wouldn't have 2 of my 4 beautiful granddaughters. And I decided about 2 years ago that we would turn a misfortune into hopefully being able to help some people. And we started a foundation that is a charitable organization, 501c3, that gives financial assistance to couples or singles, same-sex, heterosexual, whomever, people who have medical insurance but who are not insured for infertility, for any type of treatment. And I think when I first told Nicole about the idea, her reaction was, well, there's got to be a lot of places out there that do that already, because it's a good idea, but they're stepping on somebody else's toes, or it's already been done. And I found that it hadn't been done in exactly the way we wanted to do it. Allowing people to go to their doctor of choice, as long as it's an approved reproductive endocrinologist, giving grants that people do not have to pay back, not making people fundraise for us. Obviously, if they want to, it's nice, but giving grants that cover the entire procedure, not doling out $500 or $1,000 at a time and making somebody save for 6 years more to hope that they have the amount of money. In any case, I can answer questions individually if anybody has them, and I have brochures. In 2 years, since we started this, we've given out 17 grants, all from individual donations. There are 4 Baby Quest babies throughout the country, ranging from Portland to Little Rock to, if I forget, Reno, and where's the last one? I forgot. Anyway, and then we have 2 more expected, so there'll be 6 altogether. We've given out the 17 grants. We've done same-sex couples. We've done egg freezing for a young woman, 15, losing her ovarian reserve and needing her eggs frozen. She's gone through that process twice. And we have been very fortunate. We've been honored by ringing the opening bell at NASDAQ. We've had 2 presentations of a dramatic reading called Hush, one here in Los Angeles, one in New York. And this really speaks to what the panel was saying about infertility being hushed. That was the title, not to keep infertility a secret. And it's a set of developmental readings about the trials and tribulations that many of these actors and actresses have had going through infertility. And anyway, our next grant deadline is May 14th. We give out grants twice a year, May and November. People say, well, how many do you give? It depends on our donations. We do things like we have little pins that we sell, which helps us raise money. We get money from individuals. As I said, we're not a large foundation. We have no overhead whatsoever. Nobody gets a salary. And I have an amazing board. Ashley Stiles-Turek, who is here, is on my board, along with about 10 other very outstanding board members, reproductive endocrinologists, family formation attorneys, financial analysts, and women's health advocates. And altogether, we can't solve the problem, and unfortunately, we're not the bank of infertility, which many people think we are, but we try. And for each individual who we can help, we can hopefully make another family happy, and build a family. Anyway, do any of you have any questions about? Thank you.
Do you have any questions either for Pam or for any of our panelists? Anything about the session? Anyone have any? I know we were talking, you mentioned your production of Hush, and we talked a little bit about that and sharing the stories. Were any of you involved in the most recent one that was here in LA, right?
Saw it.
Yeah.
You saw it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
So how did that feel from that standpoint of being in the audience and kind of witnessing? I mean, it's not really a topic that's covered too often in a media standpoint. And when it is, I think a lot of times there's frustration that it's inaccurate or it's, pushed under the rug, the emotional aspect. So how did it feel seeing like the real raw emotional side of the infertility process acted out in that manner?
I was really taken by the, one of the actors was a man who had been through this with his wife, and I was so taken by his sharing, by what his process was like and how he watched his wife. And, at some point he was like, let's just be that really cool couple that doesn't have kids, that just, travels and goes out to eat all the time and, and just has great sex and not, doesn't have to worry about, it's time to go have sex now. And,
Right.
it was really, just hearing it from his perspective really was, it was very eye-opening.
I just think things like this are really important in creating the dialogue. And my husband and I have actually been working on a documentary kind of for that reason, to show what it really looks like. Because I think you're right, and the production of Hush was sort of a real story, and what we started filming 2 years ago just as a way to kind of process. And we had no idea that 2 years would go by. And actually one of the people in our documentary is here today who, we sort of have opened it up to look at how families are made and in different ways and what it's really like for real people who aren't celebrities or who, don't have a ton of money and have to really make these kind of real life decisions. And I think productions like this and just getting the word out and functions like this, I think, are really important to kind of show what it's like on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
Because it is day to day and it's every day until you're out, So, I don't know, it's...
Well, thank you. I'm definitely excited to hear more about that as it comes along, and hopefully
Hopefully there'll be an ending one of these days.
Hopefully,
That's what we're looking for.
Hopefully the documentary will have a very happy ending, as well as continuing to spread the word and kind of remove some of those misconceptions that surround fertility and what it's literally like. Is there anything that anyone would like to add? Anything about the process that you've been through, or?
I would just say that one of the things I've observed over the many years now that I've worked in this field is the people that seem to be most successful are the people who are who they work through their emotions, their process, and then they go on to the next step, and they keep letting the dream of a child, their goal, pull them forward. They don't get too far stuck in it doesn't look the way we want it to, and that's really it's been interesting over the years to really observe that. So,
and I would just add that there is an end to infertility at some point, and people and families are made, and there's a lot of different ways that families are made, and it's painful and it's an emotional process and journey. But I think if you're kind of open and can maintain some sense of optimism, that you'll find your babies in some way. So just to end on a hopeful note.
Well, thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of you for being here. I want to remind you, if you're talking about the events today online, to use the hashtag FPLA14 on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. These videos will all be available online, thanks to FORA.tv for recording them for us. Our panelists and Pam, the Baby Quest founder, will still be available a little bit after the session. If you guys have questions and want to talk to them personally, you're welcome to do so. We also want to thank our sponsor, Ferring Pharmaceuticals, for sponsoring this session. And please continue the conversation online. Get on the website. You can learn more about our speakers, learn more about our sponsors. And we thank you for coming.